This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. A deadly winter storm is racing across the country today, pounding the Northeast. But before heading north, that same system that produced tornadoes in the South, authorities believe one in Alabama killed at least 23. And with a number of people still missing, that number is expected to rise. Mark Martin has the story.
Officials say more than a dozen tornadoes reportedly struck parts of Alabama and Georgia. They knocked homes off their foundations, leveled trees, destroyed cars, and left thousands without power.
I was sitting there praying, asking the Lord to protect everybody around us.
It went from dark to daylight. I just watched it just suck the clouds in and everything.
In Alabama, authorities say a powerful F3 tornado, typically carrying winds more than 158 miles an hour, tore down a country road, leaving a path of damage a half-mile wide. Residents are in shock, but trying to move forward and help those in need.
I've lived here my whole life. Me personally, this is especially getting out and helping. This is the worst.
The entire state of Alabama is under a state of emergency.
This is very sad.
You just heard the voice of a man in Georgia showing the destruction in his neighborhood. The death toll is high in Alabama, and officials warn it's expected to rise. Search and rescue workers are looking for survivors, even flying drones with heat-sensing devices attached to them. Meanwhile, the same winter weather system is dumping snow, sleet, and rain from New York to Boston, making for treacherous driving conditions. In addition, the Midwest and West saw its share of snow and dangerous weather. Outside of Denver, this pickup went off the road and landed in an icy creek. As the storm continues to move, it has affected more than 130 million Americans across the eastern half of the country. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Weather Bell Chief Meteorologist Joe Bastardi spoke with CBN News and gave us a look at what we can expect this week from the weather.
I think Sunday and then again next Wednesday or Thursday, there could be some severe weather outbreaks again, maybe a little bit further west and north, because basically after this very, very cold week that's coming up across much of the United States, the cold next week will retreat into the west. And it'll be mild in the east. It'll be like spring in the east. And then what will happen is that cold in the west is going to push back east for, St. Patrick's Day toward the perhaps the end of March. And when it does, when that clash takes place, there will be a couple of storms that are capable of causing the same kind of severe weather.
One piece of good news, Bastardi did say that despite the devastating storm, it's not supposed to be an overly active tornado season. Well, House Democrats are stepping up their investigations into President Trump and those closest to him. This involves scores of people, including Trump's children, former business partners, and administration officials. Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler says it's too early to talk about impeachment, but does believe the president obstructed justice. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, though, says Nadler's sights have always been fixed on impeachment.
We will be issuing document requests to over 60 different people and individuals from the White House to begin the investigations, to present the case to American people about obstruction of justice, corruption, and abuse of power.
I think Congressman Nadler decided to impeach the president the day the president won the election.
There are now 6 committees investigating the president for alleged collusion with Russia in the 2016 election, his tax returns, and possible conflicts of interest in his business dealings. Trump says these new investigations are coming because special counsel Robert Mueller's probe isn't panning out. But Nadler points to Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen. He says Cohen's testimony before Congress last week opened up many new avenues for investigation. And joining us now with more is the host of the CBN News program, The Global Lane, Gary Lane. Gary, talk about Jerry Nadler and what kind of information is he zeroing in on right now?
Heather, this goes well beyond just looking at Russian collusion and the Trump campaign. What this really is about is a fishing expedition. That's what many of Trump's supporters would say, and the president would say it's a witch hunt. But here are some of the names of the people beyond just his family members. They're looking at Cambridge Analytica. They're looking at Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, the NRA, Eric Prince, who is the former head of Blackwater USA. So this goes well beyond just politics and the presidential campaign. They're looking at business dealings and personal communications, business communications, personal communications, that sort of thing.
What do you see as their underlying motivation, strategy? What's their end game? Where are they going?
Well, the end game, of course, is to damage President Trump. They know that he's going to run for president again in 2020, and they want to do whatever they can to bring him down, at least in the eyes of the public, and maybe even possible impeachment. But, you know, Nadler has said that he believes the president is guilty of obstructing justice. Isn't that interesting? Before they even look at have the investigation, he's already coming to that conclusion.
What kind of approach are you seeing from the president at this point in time?
Well, as you would expect, the president treats this as a witch hunt. Here's what he tweeted earlier today. He said, look, Russian collusion has fallen apart. There was no collusion except by crooked Hillary and the Democrats. They say, gee, I have no idea. Let's look at Trump's finances and every deal he has ever done. So, I mean, how would you feel about this if this were you, if they started looking at every aspect of any business dealings, if you had a business, wanting your tax records, going over them with a fine-tooth comb? This has nothing to do with collusion. It really is a question about the true nature of congressional oversight and constitutional mandate for legislative authority.
Well, there's lots to watch, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Democrats overplay their hand here. We'll stand by. Well,
if they overplay their hand, that's going to come back to bite them in the 2020 election, because remember Bill Clinton, when Bill Clinton was impeached by the Congress, his popularity approval rating went up to 73%. Trump's is 52% now, so if they keep going, they may lose the next election.
Could backfire.
They've got to be careful.
All right, yes. Gary Lane, thank you so much. Well, with more and more Democrats running for president, CBN News will go to the White House for a look at the latest contenders in the growing Democratic field. That's on Faith Nation tonight, only on the CBN News channel. And Massachusetts lawmakers are considering a bill that could revoke parental custody of children if parents seek therapy for their kids to address same-sex attraction or gender confusion. It is the most extreme measure of what has become a trend. Counseling bans in at least 11 states. They make it illegal for youth to talk with licensed counselors about concerns or confusion around these issues. So far, however, none of these laws have categorized such therapy as child abuse, and that is what the Massachusetts bill does. We are joined right now on Skype from Massachusetts with Andrew Beckwith. He is the president of the Massachusetts Family Institute and has been following this particular bill since it was introduced in 2013. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Heather. Thank you for having me.
Explain in particular, what is the concern with regards to this parental custody portion of the bill? How would that play out?
Sure. Well, the way I'll categorize this law is that this is a bill that would allow the state to take, for example, your daughter and make her someone else's son. What I mean by that is that it creates a ban on any type of treatment, including talk therapy or counseling, for children who are struggling with or suffering from unwanted same-sex desires or gender confusion. And what it says is that therapists can't help them, for example, feel comfortable in their own body. If there's a young
What I think is interesting, though, about this is that this bill takes it a step further than and punishes the parents. Is that correct?
It does. So it prohibits counselors and therapists from doing this type of treatment, but it also then categorizes the treatment itself as child abuse under the section of law that allows the State Department of Children and Families to take custody away from biological parents.
Well, I want to ask you, you've been following this bill for a while. This is not the first year they've considered it, but last year, Massachusetts lawmakers didn't vote on these bills until late in the session. But this year, they're holding a hearing tomorrow. Why the aggressive timeline this year?
Well, they came very close to passing it last year, and they've passed similar legislation, minus the child abuse provision, in every other state in New England. It was vetoed in Maine under the former governor. So there's really it's part of a national campaign, and they've got all of New England tied up, except really for Massachusetts and Maine right now. And if they can pass it now, early on in the session, maybe when people aren't paying as much attention, they'll be able to prohibit any child in New England from receiving the therapy and treatment that the child themselves may desire.
You have strong Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate in Massachusetts. What are your hopes for this bill at this point?
Well, we're bringing as many people as we can to testify at the hearing tomorrow and reaching out to the media to tell this story so that people are aware that this bill is so radical, it bans even counseling and talk therapy and labels it as child abuse. So that in Massachusetts, if this bill becomes law, you could very easily have a scenario where, say, a 15-year-old girl feels like she might be a boy, and if she goes and has her breast removed and is pumped full of artificial testosterone, that'd be fine. But if she is counseled to feel comfortable in her own body, that would be child abuse, and the parents could lose custody of her. I think most people, when they understand that that's what this law does, will reach out to their elected officials and tell them to vote against it. That's what we did last session. It seemed to work. We're going to do it again and keep telling these truths.
Well, it certainly is fascinating, at least from parents' perspective. And just briefly, we're about out of time, but I want to ask you, do you see this headed to the Supreme Court ultimately?
Absolutely. There was a case last year, the NIFLA case, which had very strong language on this particular issue of protecting the speech of counselors and their clients to have these conversations. So if the law's passed, we'll take it straight to court, and it will head to the Supreme Court eventually, one way or the other, I'm sure.
All right. Well, Andrew Beckwith with the Massachusetts Family Institute, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, Heather.
The United States officially closed its consulate general in Jerusalem today. The consulate served as the de facto U.S. embassy to the Palestinians for decades, but now diplomatic relations with the Palestinians will take place through the new U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. The State Department said the merger doesn't signify a change in U.S. policy towards the Palestinians, but Palestinian leader Saeb Erekat called it the final nail in the coffin for the U.S. role as a peacemaker. The Trump administration plans to unveil its new peace plan after Israel's elections on April 9th. Coming up, what U.S.-backed Syrian fighters are doing to continue their fight against ISIS militants in Syria.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I Wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
U.S.-backed Syrian fighters are continuing their push to drive ISIS out of their last pocket of territory in Syria. Syrian Democratic Forces fighters had to slow down their advance on the Syrian city of Baghouz because the Islamic terror group was using civilians as human shields. Still, a spokesman for the Kurdish-led SDF forces vowed in a tweet that the battle for the city was going to be over soon. ISIS is trying to hang on to the last tiny piece of land in eastern Syria, reportedly deploying snipers and guided missiles and using dug-out tunnels for surprise attacks. Joining us now with more is CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas. So, George, they're hanging on here.
They really are.
ISIS is in other countries, of course. Sure. Why are they clinging to this last little bit in Syria?
Well, remember, this was where al-Baghdadi, in essence, declared the sort of the foundation, the headquarters of the caliphate. And here, years later, we are on the verge, with the backing of the SDF, on the verge of taking them out. Over the weekend, about 500 civilians came out of Baghouz, among them, reportedly, about 150 ISIS militants. In total, just this past week, close to 5,000 civilians, so many also ISIS fighters, ISIS sympathizers, wives of ISIS, the children of ISIS came pouring out. So this is in its dying days as we see the end of ISIS, at least in Syria.
Well, and I got to ask you, how do we take this, the fact that it's in its dying days in Syria in the bigger context? I mean, how much of a victory is this, given that ISIS is elsewhere in the world?
Well, this is the problem that we have with radical Islam. You cut off the hydra, so to speak. You got rid of Osama bin Laden years ago. I'm sure al-Baghdadi has crosshairs on his life. The reality is that you're dealing with an ideology. You cannot snuff out an ideology with precision-guided missiles, with F-14s, with bombs and explosions, as you see happening right now in Baghouz. That's the reality. It's an ideology, as you mentioned, that is all across the United States. In fact, in 2017, the FBI director said we had close to about 1,000 open cases here in the U.S. But dealing with the ideology is going to be a much, much difficult challenge. We're talking about decades to come, perhaps even generations to come, in order to fight this battle.
Talk about, in Syria in particular, how many Islamic terrorists are still in the fight at this point?
The numbers vary between 500 to 1,000. We're not quite sure. As I said, the folks are fleeing from Baghouz. In fact, I was on the phone the other day with Dave Eubank of the Free Burma Rangers, and he was talking about, George, there are people, these are not just Syrians. He listed off the countries. There are French, British, Indian, Bangladeshi, Nigerian, Chechen, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Russians. I mean, it's like the We Are the World concert in Syria. People from around the world came to this place. But remember, I've covered the war in Chechnya. I've covered the war in Somalia, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. The list goes on. When the Muslim world believes that it is under attack, Muslims from all over the world will come to fight to protect what's called the Ummah, which is Arabic for the society, for the world. And that's what's happening today. In its dying days here in Syria, at least, they are feeling the pressure, and we're on the verge of completely driving them out of Syria.
Really,
but
a
not
turning
the ideology.
point. Yeah, a turning point. All right, George Thomas, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Well, up next, why one expert says Democrats' mission to halt climate change is a waste of time and money.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I Wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
In California, 25 feet of snow have dumped on the Sierra Nevada mountains just this month. Locals are calling it February buried. And across the nation, we are having one of the coldest, snowiest winters ever. At the same time, climate change advocates continue to sound the alarm of coming destruction with programs like the Democrats' Green New Deal. But one of America's top climate scientists says it is all a waste of time and money. Dale Hurd has the story.
A new book predicts 100 million climate refugees by 2050. Disagree and you're labeled a climate denier because we're told the science is settled.
This Sunday, the climate crisis. The science is settled.
When NBC's Meet the Press did a special on climate change recently, skeptics were kept off the program.
We're not going to give time to climate deniers. The science is settled, even if political opinion is not.
But the science of climate change is only settled for those who believe the climate models, or those scientists afraid of losing research dollars by denying it's a problem. Several of America's top climate scientists, like Dr. Roy Spencer, say it's not settled at all.
This is the holy grail of climate research. Right there. That's the net feedback parameter, which determines climate sensitivity, which determines whether global warming is going to kill us or make us more prosperous.
Before becoming a principal research scientist at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, Dr. Spencer was a senior scientist for climate studies at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center.
What's ironic is that those of us who are skeptical and outspoken about climate change, for instance, myself, John Christie, MIT, Dick Lindzen, we are more credentialed than most of the alarmists you will find in the media being quoted today. A lot of those people have degrees in geography, or they don't have any kind of science degree at all. These are people that really don't know what they're talking about. We are the credentialed ones. They are not.
Spencer agrees the Earth has warmed and that carbon dioxide warms the atmosphere. But there are still too many possible causes for the Earth's warming. Is it from deep ocean circulation, or is it simply a rebound from the period known as Little Ice Age?
We don't understand natural causes of climate change. Since we don't understand them, we can't put them in a climate model. It's entirely possible there are cyclical changes, probably related to deep ocean circulation, that are causing these things, but we don't know.
We're told in the media that climate change has made weather more severe, even though statistics say otherwise. The number of large tornadoes has gone down dramatically since the 1950s. Hurricane activity in the U.S. is still at a historic low.
In the U.S., we went for almost 12 years without a major hurricane strike in the United States, starting after 2005. Now, that was something that a NASA scientist had calculated is about a 1 in 250-year event.
In fact, some of the worst hurricane activity in the eastern United States was long before the widespread use of fossil fuels. The Atlantic coast of the United States was reformed by monster hurricanes that struck between the 1600s and the 1800s, long before so-called greenhouse gases or SUVs. This piece of land at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay is geographic testimony to the great hurricanes hundreds of years ago. Willoughby Spit was created by those hurricanes. 800 acres of sand, more than a square mile. Today, people blame cars for changing the weather. They used to blame witches. Records show that during Little Ice Age, beginning in the 1500s, a lot of people in Europe were executed for the charge of using witchcraft to change the weather.
We had crop failures, shorter growing seasons, and it's recorded that hundreds of thousands of people were executed in Europe for the crime of witchcraft. People literally thought their neighbor was causing the shorter growing seasons. Today we have computer models that say your neighbor's SUV is affecting the storms and the climates.
French philosopher Pascal Bruckner has written that the climate change movement resembles a pagan religion that pushes an apocalyptic narrative.
Because it uses all the elements of traditional religion, especially the theme of the apocalypse.
In pushing her multi-trillion-dollar Green New Deal, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says the world only has 12 years to prevent the worst effects of climate change. Spencer says government policy will change nothing.
You could get rid of the United States entirely. It would not have a measurable impact on future temperatures by the end of this century.
Meanwhile, the big loser is science, which has been corrupted by a system in which Spencer says grant money is largely only given to scientists who believe in man-made climate change.
Science is definitely being damaged when we talk about climate science, because the scientists involved, I think, are twisting the truth.
And Spencer wonders what will happen when skeptics such as himself eventually pass from the scene, while an entire generation of young people is being raised to believe that the Earth faces doomsday. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
A reminder to check out our CBN News Daily Rundown podcast with Caitlin Burke, which deals with a key story in the news every day. You can find it at cbnnews.com on the show tab. We hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us.